Okay, so I have my chat window up. So if you have a question, problem, confusion, or comment, but you either can't or don't want to vocalize it, just throw it in the chat and I will work at paying attention to it. Also, as usual, at least I hope it's starting to feel usual. If you do have a question, problem, confusion, comment, please don't, you know, don't worry about etiquette. In other words, if I'm speaking and something comes up, just, interject because it's not, you can't rely on me seeing a raised hand. Um, of course, if someone else is speaking, please, let them finish. But if I'm saying something and you're not sure what's going on, or you have a thought, or whatever it might be that you want to contribute, you know, don't be shy about interrupting. Because, like I said, I can't guarantee you that I will that I'll see a an icon raised hand, or if you turn a camera on your own raised hand. Okay, so couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Um, One is that I hope, have been working away on the initial chapters that we are covering, or that we covered last week. I'm going to spend a little bit of time today going over some highlights that I hope will either clarify, reinforce, or otherwise make sense to you. I do want I hope I remember to say this when we get started on the material. Some of the stuff that we're working on early on might seem a little bit, counterintuitive or otherwise confusing. And if that's the case, don't worry. There's nothing wrong with you. Sometimes it's the case that, as with, let's say, watching a movie or reading a book or a news article, whatever, you kind of have to work through a bit of the thing before what you initially read or saw or heard starts to make sense. And I think that that's the case, here. So, for example, last week, forgive me, I want to say, I think it was Ben who asked this terrific question about one of the quote unquote weird cases of validity. And it allowed us to have a conversation about a number of really important concepts and skills that we want to know and be able to practice. But the question, I think, had to do with the fact that this one weird case of validity is weird. It's counterintuitive. And so the idea that I was hoping to get across on that front is, it will make sense as we go forward. Right now, it's more of a file away. And in fact, if you are comfortable with sometimes just sort of making what I call the Miyagi move, right? Did everybody see the original Karate Kid? Mr. Miyagi makes, I don't remember the character's name, but makes the Karate Kid just wax his cars. It's like, why are you making me wax these cars? I don't see the point. I'm just, blah, right? But then at the big fight, it all becomes clear. It's kind of like that, right? I'm asking you to just sort of just do this thing and know that thus and such is the case. And then as we go forward and we keep learning by doing, that material that I asked you to just kind of know that, and those skills that I asked you to just perform without really understanding them, those will become clearer and much more comfortable. At least that's the plan. Okay, other housekeeping items. So you should have been working on your quiz. You should also have accessed the textbook. I hope you don't have any issues with that. In addition, I want to, if I didn't tell you before, we have a course embedded tutor, Lindsay Lazo, who is fantastic. They're wonderful, wonderful tutor. I think Lindsay is going to drop in to say hi to us next week. But in the meantime, if I'm not mistaken, I posted their hours and link for meeting via Zoom. Okay. And I think that's it on the housekeeping front. Is there anything that anything you have questions about that you want to talk about? I think I mentioned before, I'll take silence as approval. So if I don't hear from you, I'm going to think everything's great, or at least everything's okay for now. Oh, one other thing. I think Zeba, it was you who asked about extra credit, and
Hi, Professor. This is Ziba. It
ha,
was me.
it was you, yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, I promise I haven't forgotten. And short story is this. Yes, I am. I've got to set my mind to the extra credit that I want to provide this semester. It has to do with material that we're going to be working on starting like first week of March. And it has to do, it's basically a program that, it has to do with a program that our textbook author has developed to allow us to work derivations or work proofs. And I'm super excited about that. So it should be great practice for you. It should be a great opportunity for extra credit. And on my end, because I think practicing is super important. It's kind of a nice way to get you to practice. And by the way, I think I mentioned that you'll be kind of guinea pigs on that derivation program. So it'll be fun, I think. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Of course, of course. So yeah, if there's any, like, if you think I may have forgotten, or if you have a question about it, just let me know. Kenneth has, yes, the question that we need to definitely work on. So hold on just a sec, because here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to log in. Hold on. Okay, so I'm logging in on my tablet, and I'm going to do what I did last week. Namely, I am going to share the whiteboard. Now, what's going to happen is this: because the whiteboard's going to take up part of one of my displays, I'm gonna lose, I think, some of your tiles. So please, 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 if you have a question, problem, confusion, use that chat room, use the chat tool, or just speak up. Okay, just interrupt me if you need to. I welcome that. Okay, so what? Oh, maybe I did get everybody in here. That would be sweet. I think we do have everybody in here. Okay, so here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to highlight some concepts and skills that bring us to the material that will bring us right up to the material that we're going to cover this week. But I'm not going in lockstep, chapter 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to be sort of roaming around on the highlights, so I'm trying to build a picture here. So just know, Kenneth, that your great question is central to our work today. All right, so as a recap, you and I both know that in general, or sort of the overarching concept for us in this course is argumentation. So first, we need to know what an argument is. So, and sorry, this is just a summary of chapters 1 through 3, and to reiterate, not in any particular order of chapters 1 through 3. So, an argument is a collection of statements one of which is supported. And by the way, we can remove the word supported and replace it with any one of the following: established, demonstrated, right? So one of which is supported, established, demonstrated, or proven by the other or others. Okay, so an argument, when it's presented in full, right, when there's nothing missing, is going to consist of at least two statements. Okay, so now let's talk about what a statement is, right? So a statement, and for our purposes, we're going to also refer to statements as propositions. So a statement or proposition is a sentence that is true or false. Right? So all arguments are aimed in the direction of establishing some truth, right? Proving some truth, justifying some truth, right? So that means that the only possible candidate for an argument is going to be a sentence that is true or false, because we aim to establish the sentence in question, right? So we can also use claim, right? So lots of times you'll see in the language surrounding argumentation or involved in argumentation, statement, proposition, claim, all used synonymously. Okay. And then the supported statement, so that'll be B, is the conclusion. The supported, and I'll just use a bunch of synonyms here: supported, established, demonstrated, justified, claim is the conclusion. And then the other or others that do the supporting, right? So the reasons to believe, the conclusion, or the justifications for the conclusion, etc., are the premises. And you can have just one premise, or you can have many premises, right? But the argument needs at least one statement that serves as support, at least one statement that is supported. Okay. Our study focuses on the form of the argument or reasoning and the statements that constitute it. And by the way, I'll often lapse into using the words statement and sentence interchangeably, even though there are sentences like questions or exclamations that are not statements, right? So, how are you is a sentence, but it doesn't have a truth value. Yeah. But I'll still, in the context of logic, I'll often talk about sentence this, sentence that, where the implicit understanding is that we're talking about a claim, right? a descriptive or prescriptive assertion. That is a sentence that is true or false. Okay. So when we're thinking about the form of our reasoning, we're not concerned with the content, right? Content does matter in an important sense, but what we're really after, what we want to pour into the form is good content, but we want to make sure we understand what the form of the reasoning is, right? So let me give you an example. It's one that I trot out all the time, and even though I use it repeatedly, and so may be accused of being not very imaginative, part of the reason why I do it is so that you remember it and then you've got something you can hold on to, right? If you get confused, you can say, oh yeah, well, I remember, we've got the green cheese argument. Now, how did that go? And you can sort of work your way to the idea that you want. Okay. So let's, let me go ahead and put a little A here. Okay, so we distinguish form from content. So, for example, the moon is made of blue or green cheese. So that'll be premise 1. Premise 2, the moon is not made of blue cheese. Thus, the moon is made of green cheese. Question for you from last week. Does the form of this reasoning make sense? Remember the candy example? Sorry, I asked if the form of the reasoning made sense. I meant to ask, does the example make sense? Right? Do you remember I keep saying make sense. Do you remember the form? Remember last week we talked about having candy in one hand or the other? This example has the same form, right, as the candy example. Remember also that, and so now we're getting into big ticket, the big ticket concept, entailment or validity. Remember also that because the focus is on form, not content, what makes this argument logically correct is not the claim about blue cheese and green cheese. In fact, that's not at all relevant to the structural integrity of the argument. Rather, it's the form of the argument that tells us the premises entail the conclusion. The premises force the conclusion. The premises necessitate the conclusion. Okay? So just let me pause for a sec. How are we doing? Does this ring bells? Even if you might still find the concept a little bit tricky. Does this sound familiar to you?
A little bit. Yeah.
Okay. Good, Armand. Good. One of the things you're going to find, and P.S., this is partly why practice is so crucial. When you're embarking on new territory, it's sort of, this is new intellectual territory, but what's weird is it's territory that in fact with which you're intimately familiar. right? So you're so used to reasoning in your daily life that when you have to sort of divest yourself of the familiar and now look at this in a formal way as a disciplined study, sometimes you feel thrown off balance intellectually, right? And so that's A, why practice is so important, and B, why the repetition is not such a bad thing for us to do, because you're going to find, I think, as Armin just has sort of agreed, you want to say, oh yeah, I recognize that. I may not be fully comfortable with it, but I recognize it. I remember it. It's not entirely unfamiliar. Okay, and then as with last week, I'll save these bad boys, these whiteboards. So hold on, I'll get a new whiteboard. Okay, so where were we? That was 2A. All right, so we're still on 2A. The form of the green cheese argument is this. A or B, not A, so B. Right? Now, notice we can pour into this form any sentences that we want. Right? Recall last week, candy's in this hand or that hand. It's not in this hand, so it must be in this hand, in that hand. Right? Here's an argument with good content, right? We can try this. Joe Biden or Barack Obama is the 44th president of the United States. Well, Joe Biden's not the 44th president of the United States. Joe Biden is his 46th president. Therefore, Barack Obama is the 44th president. Now we've got content that we take to be correct, right? But it doesn't matter, for the sake of entailment, what you pour into the form, right? The form is what's known as truth preserving, right? So I don't know if this rings bells. We assume the premises are true. I'm actually redundant when I say that. Premises just are what we take to be true, right? To see whether or not that scenario, right, that the truth of the premises forces us to accept the conclusion as true. Whether or not the premises are actually true, well, heck, I don't know, right? Because I've just got A and B. I don't know. So if we're talking about the moon being made of green cheese, or the example I gave you with the candy, right? Remember there, we've got a false original premise, a true second premise, and a false conclusion. Candy's in this hand or this hand, right? Sorry, I opened up my hands. Candy's in this hand or this hand. It's not in this hand, therefore it's in this hand. And remember, I opened up my hand, it's not actually there. So, false premise, candy's in one hand or the other. True premise, it's not in the one. False conclusion, so it's in the other. So the actual facts on the ground, right, don't comport with the structure. But the structure is what forces the truth of the conclusion. And now going back to something that... or what set off this part of the discussion last week was, Brian's question about contradiction, right? When the argument is valid, that is, when the premises entail the conclusion, it's impossible to reject the conclusion without thereby contradicting the premises, right? Now, when we have an argument that, when we have an argument whose premises fail to entail the conclusion, then we have what's known as an invalid argument. Right? So, example, and I think, can't remember if I use, oh yeah, I did, because who was it? No, it wasn't Bohr. Who was it? Sorry, I'm looking at names at tiles. Maybe it was Armin. No, it wasn't. But in any event, I'd given you an example last week, and I had kind of messed up to making a sort of preying on your knowledge about Pierce College. Anyway, but here's an example of an invalid argument. So, okay, so when the form of the argument is not truth preserving. By the way, remember my request from last week. Let me know if you cannot decipher what I'm writing. I know that sometimes my writing is illegible, so let me know if there's something you can't make out. So when the form of the argument is not truth preserving, the premises do not entail the conclusion. That is, the argument is invalid. Right? So, example, if I have 10 pennies, oh, sorry, my tablet decided to ask me if I wanted to do an update. So I lost the whiteboard for a second. Okay, if I have 10 pennies, then I have 10 cents. I have 10 cents. So I have 10 pennies. So here's the question for you. Assuming, right, that it's true to say if I have 10 pennies, then I have 10 cents, and it's true to say that I have 10 cents, must it be true that those 10 cents are made up of 10 pennies? And your answer is what? Yes or no? Okay, I heard a yes and a no. So if we're going to say yes, let me ask you the question in a slightly different way. Is it possible that I have, instead of 10 pennies, is it possible that I have a dime or 2 nickels? Does that make sense? Okay, so now for those of you who said, no, it's not necessarily the case that I have 10 pennies, when you can generate a counter example, right, then such as this, well, you'd say not necessarily. I could have a dime. In other words, the premises don't force that conclusion. So this is an argument form that you're going to want to know because it's an imposter. It's called affirming the consequent. And when we get deep into the work that we're starting this week, we'll be able to show, by way of what's called a truth table, how this argument fails. That the following form, if A, B, B, so A, right, is a bad form. It's a flawed form. It's a formal fallacy. And we'll be able to show that by way of a truth table. Right now, the way that we show that it's flawed is by generating what's known as like I said, a counter example. Okay. Let me go ahead and give you an arguably more intuitive way to think about the counterexample process. So we'll save this and let's work a new whiteboard. Okay, so that was B. So C. So one way, and we will learn a number of techniques. So you won't be left with this one technique, but one way or one technique to demonstrate invalidity or non-consequence is to create a counterexample. Right? So let me give you a for example. So, suppose that the tiles, and I'm just going to use my view as the layout. Suppose that, given my tiles, I say the following. Jerry is to, and but we don't need you don't need to see this in order to make sense of this. I'm just letting you know what I'm doing. Jerry is to the left of Ben. Jerry is to the left of Armand. So Ben is to the left of Armand. So what you can do in the case of generating a counterexample is you can draw, a world, right? So, here's a world in which Jerry is to the left of Ben, right? Here is a world in which Jerry is to the left of Armin, right? But can I make it false that Ben is to the left of Armin? So in other words, can I draw a world in which, for example, Armin is to the left of Ben instead, right? Well, here's one way I can do this. Jerry is to the left of Ben. Jerry is to the left of Armin. Right? So I falsified the conclusion without violating or contradicting the premises. Does that make some sense? What do we think? You're all so excited you don't know what to say.
It makes sense.
Sorry, so I didn't know who was speaking. Somebody said it makes sense, I think, and then I think it was Armin started to say something. Sorry, what are you thinking? Don't be shy.
I was gonna say it's so you're just thinking of a different interpretation of the premises without destroying the argument or the premises, right?
So Armand, what you said is almost exactly right, but the destruction that you're talking about is not sort of the argument. What you're doing is you are attempting to show that the conclusion can be false without making the premises false. You maintain true premises. Does that help a little bit?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah?
I got it.
Okay. Let me give you another example, and then and this time is what we'll do is we're going to change out the content. So, how about something like this? And forgive me because I feel like we worked this, but maybe I'm wrong. I'm thinking of somebody else. Some doctors are dentists. Oops, dentists. Some dentists are surgeons. So, some doctors are surgeons. Now, you and I will say, yes, true, true, true. But the fact that, so let's see, let's do this. Just because the sentences are true, or let me restate that, because I think that the way I was formulating the sentence is not very elegant. The fact that the premises are true does not, oh, darn it, sorry guys, does not thereby guarantee the conclusion, right? And let's work an example to make sense of this. And of course, I run out of room on this whiteboard, so I'm gonna have to duplicate the argument and then work the counterexample. So bear with me. Right. So again, some doctors are dentists. Some dentists are surgeons. So some doctors are surgeons. So here's what we do. Let's first, extract the content, right? Doctors, dentists, and surgeons. So we have some A are B, some B are C, so some A are C, right? So now what we want to do is take the conclusion and generate content that makes the sentence false, right? So suppose that we say something like this. So how about this? Some dogs are cats, right? And then suppose that now let's work backwards. We've got cats here and we've got dogs up here. So some dogs are animals. Now we'll repeat animals. Some animals are cats. And then the conclusion, so some dogs are cats. And now we've got the following in terms of our values. We've shown by way of a counterexample that despite the fact that these premises are true, the conclusion is in fact false. So the premises do not entail the conclusion. It's true that at least one dog, so some dogs, there's at least one dog that's an animal. The fact that you would say, but Mia, all dogs are animals, is not relevant to what the claim asserts. The claim asserts that At least some dogs are animals, and that is true. And it's also true that at least some animals are cats, but it's false that some dogs are cats. So we've shown by way of this counterexample that the argument fails. So going back to the point that Armand made earlier, what we're doing when we generate a counterexample is we're showing without violating the truth of the premises, we're showing that the premises don't lead to the conclusion. We're sort of destroying the belief that we're forced to accept the conclusion. Okay. Now contrast that with, let me go back to another spatial argument, because that might be helpful to you. Right. So let's talk entailment again. As a reminder, so I'll just mark this D. As a reminder, valid arguments disallow falsifying the conclusion on pain of contradiction. I'll put that in a parenthetical. Okay, so what if I do something like this? What if I say, okay, I'll take another example with folks in the class. So Jasmine is to the left of Brian. Brian is to the left of Boor. So, what must be the case? Go back to your happy cows argument. We worked the happy cows argument together, didn't we? I think we did. I showed you the happy cows commercial.
Yes, we did.
Yeah. Okay. So apply that, like draw out, extract the inference from the reasoning. Jasmine is to the left of Brian. And Brian is to the left of Boor. I'm going to use the O in Boor's name because we already have B for Brian. So in diagramming the two premises, what have I automatically written?
Jasmine is to the left of Brian of Boor.
Yeah, exactly, Victoria, right. So it must be the case, therefore, that Jasmine is to the left of Boor, right? We can try to falsify that conclusion, but we won't be successful because every time we make that conclusion false, one of the premises has to be false. Now, thank you, Dominic. If you feel at all like you're playing mental twister, you're feeling a bit discombobulated. It's like puberty. It's normal and natural. It just kind of sucks. But don't worry, you'll get used to it. In fact, again, the more we drill the existing skills, the technique for determining validity, which is attempt to falsify the conclusion. And if you can't without violating one or more of the premises, right, then that means the argument is valid. If you can falsify the conclusion without violating the premises, then the argument is invalid. The more you do that, the easier it gets. And as I say to everybody, if I can do this, anybody can do this. And I'm not being self-deprecating. It's like for real. Okay, so before we give a nod to the gold standard, as Dr. Schnee has it in our text. Let me ask you, how are we doing? Does this ring bells? Do you have residual confusions? Even if you're not able to fully articulate what the confusion is, you could say something like, I have a problem with blah. And then we can figure out what the problem is and try to resolve it. So how are we doing? What do you think? All right, I'm gonna take silence as either you're okay, good. So Kenneth, you're doing okay. Good. We'll take Kenneth as the spokesperson for the group. But in all seriousness, if you do have confusions, but maybe you're not comfortable about raising them in class, note them. Jot an idea down. Whatever it might be, and then and let's address the confusion at some point sooner rather than later, because it will doing so. Addressing it, I think, will serve you well in the long run. All right, so now, view all whiteboards. So now, so that was, all right, so D-E. All right, so now I'm going to move on to a third item for us to review, soundness. So a valid argument whose premises, and I'm abbreviating premises as PRR, whose premises are true, is sound. In other words, a sound argument is defined partly by validity and partly by actually true premises. Okay? So when you say you have you have a valid argument, yay, that's great because you've got structural correctness. But that doesn't mean that the argument is the gold standard, right? We want arguments whose premises are actually true. I mean, we're not, you and I don't tend to argue in a vacuum, right? Although what we're going to find as we move forward, and this is no small point, our study is not concerned with actual truth, right? So we get a couple of theories of truth, but we're not concerned with, how you establish truth. We're more concerned with conditions for truth, and we're more concerned with logical truth in the form of validity and entailment, but also logical truth in the form of just the structure of the sentence itself. Okay, so we're not going to be concerned with what are considered, let's say, an epistemological problem, a problem of knowledge, like how do I know that this claim is true? Do I compare it with what I'm experiencing in the world, or do I look to some authority? Or right, that's not what we do in the study of logic. We're concerned with the structure of our reasoning and the sentences that constitute that reasoning. All right, so we've got a sound argument. So now let's think about it this way. So when we have a valid argument, as we already know, right, it could be sound, but we've already seen, go back to the green cheese argument, a valid argument could be unsound. And this tends to confuse us a little bit, right? Remember, one or more of the premises is false. So go back to the green cheese argument, right? Go back to the kid I made cry, remember? Hey kid, I got candy in my left hand or in my right hand. It's not in my left hand, so, right? Valid argument, as I think it was Victoria who pointed out, the first premise, kid, I got candy in my left hand or my right hand, that premise was actually false. So valid argument, but unsound. So a valid argument, the next step, of assessing validity, of assessing an argument is to ask if it's sound, right? So premises are true, right? All invalid arguments are unsound by definition. Right? So, think about it this way. Ideally, what we want is a sound argument, because if all of us as rational individuals can grasp logical necessity, then when we pour into the whatever form we're using to reason, then we've got certainty all the way, and we demonstrate, let's say, the conclusion through a proof, and we've got certainty all the way through. If we pour into that reasoning actually true sentences, then there's got to be something wrong with somebody who doesn't commit to the conclusion, right? And of course, I'm assuming that we will generate true sentences that are good faith true sentences, not sort of deceptively true, and we can talk about that. All right, so unless you want to go back into the weird cases of validity, let me just remind us of the following. The cases of validity that are covered in the text under the classification weird are actually going to come up for us again. So for just sort of file the following away. There will be times in a derivation that we reiterate or repeat a sentence, right? So remember that one weird case of validity is to simply reiterate a sentence as an inference, right? So the sentence can be something like this, today is Tuesday, so today is Tuesday. It's weird because you think, well, you haven't really proven it. I mean, who cares, right? That seems, very trivial. But from the standpoint of the machinery of the derivations that will be working, the reiteration process helps us to move forward. So reiteration seems weird now, but it'll seem weird later still. But from just the standpoint of the mechanics of our derivations, it will make sense. That anything follows from a contradiction, right? That also feels weird, and maybe it feels even like cheating. What do you mean? Once I generate a contradiction, I can say whatever I want. We don't typically, so first I'll say this, we don't typically do that, right? When we reason, we're reasoning toward a goal, and when we, and en route to that goal, we may want to show up a contradiction, not because we want to say whatever we want, but because of the rules of entailment, right? We then are able to move forward with the reasoning. So if you'd like, think about, it sounds like Schadenfreude, but it's not really. When someone has been caught in a lie, right? supposedly, that person's, oh, gee, yeah, it's not good, right? You asserted a false sentence as true. Now I've shown that you can't maintain that false sentence, right? I've shown that you're contradicting the truth. Bad you. And we have a certain sort of satisfaction, right? The truth has now been pointed out. And then what do we do with that, right? Well, in the realm of ethics and, more broadly personal relationships, who knows what you do when once you've caught somebody in a lie. But there's sort of in terms of our psychosocial engagements, catching someone in a lie usually allows us, in terms of relationships, to move forward in a certain way. From the standpoint of just logical structure, right? We know the following: when you have a valid argument, you can have any number of true and false premises and a true conclusion. Any number of true and false premises and a true conclusion. I think I said true, false, whichever, right? So mixture of true and false premises, true conclusion. Mixture of true and false premises, false conclusion. You can have all false premises and a false conclusion. The one thing you can't have, right, is true premises, false conclusion. So if you are able to show a contradiction, that means that one of your premises in your argument is false, which means that, strictly speaking, any number of premises can be false, which means, strictly speaking, the conclusion, right, can be false. So, the idea has to do with what the structure of the reasoning forces us to accept. Okay, so that'll become clearer as we go forward, and I'll try and offer up. There's a nice example that I've stolen from somewhere. I'll bring that up a little bit later. And then there was one more. Oh yeah, the last weird case of validity has to do with sentences that are logically true. So this will also become clear when we get to premiseless proofs. In other words, when we have a sentence that is true in every possible world by virtue of its structure, doesn't matter about the content, by virtue of the structure, the sentence is true. It can never be false. That means that you can demonstrate, I should say, that sentence as true through whichever system we're working in. We're going to be learning a couple of systems, right? So the idea is that, an argument, full blown requires multiple sentences, at least one premise and a conclusion. But when we've got a sentence that's always true, then the way that we can demonstrate that it's true is to assume it's false, and then we end up with a contradiction which shows the sentence must be true. I recognize that what I'm saying might sound, it's abstract. I'm not writing anything down, and it might sound peculiar, but I'm hoping if you just, file it away, and then when we come back to it in its context, it'll make more sense. So this is one of those Miyagi moves at this point. Okay, so I mentioned implicitly, but I just want to reiterate that when we look at an argument, we're looking at a set of claims, and those claims are either true or false. There's no kind of middle ground. As our text says, we're dealing with bivalence. Every sentence that we uncover is either true or false. And the vast majority of the sentences that we work with are contingently so. In other words, depending on the circumstances, and we'll have some technical ideas of what those circumstances are, we will have a true sentence, but then under other circumstances, we'll have a false sentence. Super simple example, which will help us start moving in the direction that we want to go to today, which is starting with our connectives, is this. The sentence, Mia wears glasses, is true when I wear glasses. False, right? If we're talking about Mia wears glasses, is Mia literally right now is wearing glasses. Mia literally right now is wearing glasses, right? So we're talking about a bivalence truth, okay? For those of you who like programming, zeros and ones is sometimes the substitution. Okay. All right. So before moving on, how are we doing? What do we think? Questions, problems, confusions. Is there anything going on with the reading that you want to talk about? Is there anything going on with the practice that you want to talk about? Is there anything going on with the quiz that you want to talk about?
So I have a question. So if you have premises that are false and the conclusion that is false, if you augment one premise that is true, can that make the conclusion true?
It could. It depends on what the status of the argument is already. In other words, the argument, rephrase, an argument that is valid can't be made invalid, right? But let's say you've got an argument that's incomplete, and in its incompleteness, you've got tenuousness, contingency. And then if you augment it, you fill it out, you flesh it out, you complete it, you can then generate validity. Am I answering your question, Kenneth?
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. So now, we were talking about sentences. We were talking about sentences having, a truth value. What I'd like to do now is sort of start the walk toward the chapters that we're covering this week in the following way. We know that arguments are constituted by statements. Statements are sentences that are true or false. What do those statements look like? Well, let me give you a big overview of how we're going to look at statements from the standpoint of, technically the three systems that we're going to be looking at, right? So sentences according to a Boolean interpretation, sentences according to a propositional logic interpretation, which includes Boolean connectives, and then sentences according to a quantifier interpretation, which is rooted in a categorical or term logic. So let me give you an example based on what we were talking about earlier. So let's think about sentences this way. Suppose I go back to the great cheese, happy cows argument, right? Remember the tagline? So overview, of how we interpret sentences. Oh, I should say statements, sorry. Although I think our text says sentences as well. Oh, sorry, back out of that. Oops. Come on, Mia. So sentences are simple or compound. Sentences are singular or unspecified or quantified. So, simple sentence. Kenneth, do you mind my asking who's the superhero, or is it an anime on your tile?
Oh, she's an anime character.
An anime character? Do you mind my asking what her name is?
Cinder.
Cinder?
Yeah.
As in cinder block, like Cinder?
Yeah.
Okay. And Cinder has powers or no?
Yeah, she can eject fire out of her
Ooh.
hands.
Ooh! She can eject fire what?
Out of her hands.
Out of her hands. Okay.
Yep.
Cinder can eject fire from her hands. Okay. Oh, sorry. Hold on just a second. So, rephrase. Simple, singular. Okay. Simple, quantified. There are superheroes, or superheroes exist. Okay, so we're starting with in the territory of singular sentences, right? So singular sentences are what we're going to deal with starting in chapter 4 all the way through. When do we start quantification? All the way through through week 11. Okay. Then we'll expand our language to interpret sentences not just as simple singular, but also quantified. Then we have, so I did simple singular, simple quantified. Then we have singular compound and quantified compound. So singular compound would be Cinder. And Kenneth, is there another anime character you like a lot?
Let's just say Rem.
R-E-M. R-E-M.
Yeah.
Cinder and Rem are, I don't know, do we call them superheroes? Can I call them superheroes?
One of them's a villain, but why not?
Oh, no, that's great. Oh, let's change this out. All right, hold on. Thanks for that, Kenneth. Okay, so not both Cinder and Ren are villains. Okay? And then let's do, so quantified compound. How about this? No villains are superheroes. how did I spell that? Heroes. Yeah. Okay. All right, so that's an overview. Okay. And then now you might say, oh, really? So we've got simple sentences that are either singular or compound, and or sorry, I said simple sentences. Simple sentences that are either singular or quantified, right? And then the same with compound sentences. So here's a little chart we could use. So simple, singular, simple, quantified, compound, same, singular, quantified. So now let's get into some definitions, and then we can start to work more specifically on chapter 4. Okay, so a singular sentence is about a specifically named person, place, thing, and so forth, right? Well, we're talking about names, right? So we've got our names on the sofa back there on the chair, actually back there over my left shoulder is H. Over my right shoulder is Stewie, right? So when we've got names, right, we've got a sentence that's singular. So sorry, let me now move into chapter 4. Okay. And as we know, a singular sentence can be simple or compound. Okay, so a simple sentence, and what I'm about to tell you is not super helpful. Retroactively, it will be. So hold tight. A simple sentence does not contain a connective. Right? So you might say, well, that's great, Mia, but I don't know what a simple sentence is because I don't know what a connective is. Well, try this. A simple sentence is the smallest linguistic entity that has a truth value. Right? So when we go back, if we go back to, let's see, view all whiteboards. Where was it? Here it is. So simple singular, Cinder can eject fire from her hand. Lots of words are involved, right? But it's a simple sentence. It may it could have a dependent clause, right? But it doesn't have to. But it can have a lot of words or not. So you could say something like Cinder sits. Grammatical subject, right? Grammatical verb, smallest linguistic entity that's true or false, right? Cinder can eject fire from her hand, much longer in terms of words, but still a simple sentence. Why? Well, let's now go back to the point I made about connectives. What is a connective? We're starting with what are known as the Boolean connectives. A connective operates on a sentence, thereby compounding it. So let's look at some examples. All right, remember we had the following: not both, Cinder, and I'm going to use a capital C to stand for Cinder is a villain. Not both C and R are villains. Or sorry, I'm going to use Cinder to, or C to stand for just the name Cinder. Okay. So how do we break this down, or how do we show the elements? Well, let me build it for you. So Cinder is a villain. Rem is a villain. Cinder and Rem are villains. And then finally, oops, let me go back out. Not both Cinder and Rem are villains. Okay, so does it make sense that we've got the following? We've got two simple sentences that are conjoined sorry, hold on a sec. Let me get rid of that. I'm going to try and draw this better. The simple sentences are conjoined, yes, and then that conjunction is negated. Okay, so the two simple sentences are conjoined. The conjoined, or sorry, rephrase. I'm going to make it easier for us. The conjunction is negated. Okay. How are we doing? So what we've just done is interpreted an ordinary English claim, a compound sentence, according to its Boolean connectives. And they're just called Boolean because George Boole, the logician mathematician who developed them, or they're named after George Boole, the mathematician logician who developed them. Okay, so first off, how are we doing with this pulling away from the big picture of talking about, what an argument is and how to evaluate an argument by way of entailment or a lack of entailment, how to test or demonstrate that an argument is invalid, right? That sort of thing. How are we doing with that? Then, but moving away now from that big picture to saying, okay, now we're looking at the sentences that constitute an argument. And we're going to first look at sentences from what's known as a Boolean interpretation. That is, we're going to say, okay, we've got simple sentences, the smallest linguistic entity that has a truth value that is true or false, and then compounding connectives. And in the Boolean system, there are only three in the entirety of our language, just three. There's negation, conjunction, and disjunction. We've just seen in this set of examples, conjunction and negation. thoughts? And this is where we'll suspend work because I want to see how you're doing for if you have questions, problems, confusions, and then we'll do a recap on Thursday and pick this up and dive deeply into what we do with the Boolean connectives, translating and so forth. How are we doing? What do we think? Oh crap, that's right, Kenneth. Yeah, thank you so much for reminding me, Kenneth. Yeah. So folks, so sorry. Poor, yeah. So just so you know, I don't cancel class unless I have to. I'm my 88-year-old mother's primary caregiver. She's getting her first COVID shot on Thursday. Very, very lucky. So it's gonna take me a bit to get her into the car and it'll be a big to do. So I'm 99% sure I'm not going to make class. If I, get back in time to do something, maybe I'll pop in, and if I see somebody, great, but I just don't see how I'm going to make it. So what we'll do is this, and let's see, just so you know, well, you guys want to be working on your first exam anyway. We will pick up with this stuff then a week from Tuesday, but I will be sure to, to keep posting videos. I posted some videos last night as a sort of a highlights from last week. I'll post some highlights this week, but we've got time to pick up what we will be missing on Thursday next week. Thank you, Kenneth. Sorry about that. I have no idea what day it is. All right. So So I didn't hear anything about questions, problems, confusions. Does anybody need anything? Yeah, I gotta make a note to self about Thursday. I will, like I said, I'll post a video of or the video that's being recorded now, and then I'll also post our class notes, and then like I said, I will plan to make sure additional videos are available. All right, so thanks for reminding me about that, Kenneth. So I will see you a week from today. If in the meantime, though, you have any questions, problems, confusions as you're working on our first exam, let me know. It's not like I'm not around. I'm just not around exactly at the time we're meant to meet. Okay? Have a good one, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Professor.
Thanks.